Is it time to buy Bitcoin and crypto again? We'll talk about that today, as well as the one event that you want to keep an eye on this week, not to mention $100 of Bitcoin giveaway to one subscriber. I will give away that today. I already had a drawing for it. The winner at the end of this video. So make sure that you keep watching. Make sure if you want to be in these giveaways to subscribe to the channel below. Subscribe and leave a comment on the video. Make sure that you do that is you subscribe and you comment. I'll make sure to put you in a drawing every week. We'll have a Bitcoin giveaway. I'll announce that person and then we'll go from there. Let's go ahead and get to the charts for Bitcoin. Is it time to buy Bitcoin? As Bitcoin has been dropping along with the stock market, right? A lot of fear in the markets, a lot of uncertainty. We did have a bounce last night, depending on where you're at in the world, whether you're in Asia, whether you're in Europe, whether you're in North America. Welcome to the channel. This is for everybody. Everything that I talk about in this video pertains to you globally. We want to focus on the daily chart. Bitcoin did have a bounce. Where did it bounce exactly? Where? Well, what we talked about, right? Yesterday, I did talk about the green box as an area that I'm watching specifically, but there is the 50 weekly moving average, the orange line. That would make a great spot to put some bids at. If you bid at 76 to 77K, congrats on that trade. Of course, we did have a nice bounce to around 81K, but some news today with the stock market, with the government, that is causing the market to actually pull back. And that is some news about additional tariffs starting this week, potentially Canada. Because of that, again, it does spook the market a little bit. And because of that, we've seen the stock market actually bounce at the beginning, and then it's been dropping since. We had a nice bounce. Because of that news, the market's slightly pulling back. And because the market's slightly pulling back, we know that Bitcoin is also pulling back with it. After the bounce there at the 50 moving average on the weekly, we see that Bitcoin on the 4-hour still in a downtrend. And so typically when I buy or trade, I look at moving averages, specifically on the 4-hour chart is one of my favorite things to look at, as well as the 1-hour moving averages help you find a trend. And so if price stays below the moving averages on the intraday charts, it tends to show a continuous downtrend, at least in the short term. Now, once you get to the higher time frames, again, the daily, the monthly, and we see that Bitcoin has recovered those moving averages, those lines, those major moving averages, we can then, even though it's a lagging indicator, we know that Bitcoin is going back into an uptrend once it continues to follow above those averages. But for now, we know that Bitcoin, at least on the daily, it's been on a downtrend in the intraday, and now we're seeing the market below on the 1-hour and the 4-hour break back below some of those major moving averages. Is it a time to buy Bitcoin? Personally, I think that here in the next few months, and I'll explain why this week in videos, that we should see Bitcoin at a much higher price in the following months. And that specifically is based off what could potentially happen with the Federal Reserve in rate cuts. In the short term, if Bitcoin can stay back above where it wicked down to 76K and put in a higher low on the intraday charts, I do think that it could be a potential buying spot for a bounce here in the coming days. Why would Bitcoin bounce and why would the stock market bounce in general? We just had the news of more tariffs. What I think happens today is we get a continual pullback on stocks potentially, but tomorrow could be a big day because the event I wanted to talk to you about is the consumer price index, or the CPI numbers that will come on Wednesday. The forecasted for that is 2.9%. The previous we had is 3.0. Now, what does the U.S. consumer price index mean? Basically, it measures inflation from the consumer's perspective. You and me, us buying things that we need to live, food, rent, gas, etc. The inflation on that, and that is a key piece to inflation and something that the Federal Reserve looks at. Now, if the inflation comes out higher than expected, you can expect the Fed to continue to do what they're doing, not cut rates, not change anything. And so if it is lower, there is potential for the Fed to eventually cut rates. That's what people are hoping for. We have the CPI on Wednesday and the PPI as well. PPI, Producer Price Index, not as big as the CPI, but if it is less on both, it could be potentially better for the markets. Now, we have already heard Fed Chair Powell say that the Fed is not going to change what they're doing. At the moment, they think that their actions are accurate. They want to continue to do what they're doing. He's basically already said at this FOMC, Federal Reserve meeting this month in March and next week, they're likely not to cut rates. Just be aware of that. If we do get a low CPI tomorrow and a low PPI on Thursday, I do expect potentially a slight bounce in the market for Bitcoin. Now, if you're trading, that's a good thing. But just be aware of this. Even if we get low CPI and PPI, if you're expecting the Fed to cut rates here in the next week, and what a lot of people think as well, you're probably in for a disappointment. Potentially what we could see is the stock market as well as Bitcoin have a bounce, because all markets don't move exactly straight down. And the stock market has been pretty brutal over the past month. Because of that, there's eventually going to be a reverse to the mean. There's going to be a correction or a bounce that happens, even if it continues on down. Now, this government, but bottom line, we do need a correction or a bounce eventually. And things aren't so bad where it's not like a black swan crash where this should continue on down. We're going to eventually have a mean reversion where the price bounces for both Bitcoin and stocks. We could potentially see that this week. Going into the FOMC meeting next week, because of that, I think it could be a good opportunity to buy, especially after it hit the 50-week moving average on Bitcoin price. We may not see this 70, 75 and to 70K price at the moment. Again, depending on what the Federal Reserve does next week, that could have a strong market reaction. If people are expecting rate cuts, I think they're going to be disappointed. So just with that said, a great opportunity, as we'll get in later on this week in conversation about why we could see Bitcoin going higher. As far as people who like altcoins, if you like other crypto assets other than Bitcoin, understand that we've seen altcoins have seen the largest wipeout since the Luna collapse in May 2022. So the altcoin market cap 14-day change, we've seen it in billions. It hit a lot lower. It hasn't hit this low since May of 2022. A lot of altcoins have been wiped out. That's because, again, they're high beta Bitcoin. They're higher risk than Bitcoin. If people are getting out of Bitcoin, they're definitely getting out of higher beta, higher risk altcoins as well in the crypto market. People go to cash in times of uncertainty. This is one of those times. We've seen a lot of altcoins really take a beating, specifically Ethereum. The thing about Ethereum is this. We can look at the charts on the higher time frames. As far as Ethereum goes, I've got some different stuff marked on this chart, specifically resistance areas that they've rejected off of. But in the end, the Ethereum chart just is ugly because it's below the 200 weekly averages. Okay. That just shows that it has just not been performing very well, especially compared to Solana. As far as the weekly isn't coming up on this chart, but again, it is not below that yet. It's XRP as well. If you look at the weekly 200 moving average, is well above that. I'm just saying that Ethereum has performed has been outperformed by a lot of other major altcoins. And so if you're looking for an altcoin to get into, if you've been in it over the past few months, you've definitely underperformed compared to anything else for the most part. So there was also some news today about an ETF with staked Ethereum. And so the biggest or largest protocol for staked Ethereum is Lido. And so we saw that the news from that it bounced up around 10 to 15% in price, and then it just nuked right back down. So what I'm trying to say is that if Lido or staked Ethereum protocols don't bounce on that news, don't expect Ethereum to bounce on that news. And we haven't seen that Ethereum had a slight spike and it's back down. I'm not one to catch a falling knife. If we have Bitcoin continue lower and stocks continue lower, depending on what the Fed does in the CPI and PPI numbers, I definitely don't want to be in altcoins at this time. Okay. Now, if you are a long-term holder of altcoins and you got in a lot lower, that's one thing. But for me personally, I tend to like to show some strength prior to getting into some of these altcoins, especially Ethereum that's been so weak, and even news can't really have it bounce accordingly from that. I'm not going to jump into Ethereum yet, especially if Lido is not showing any strength. Now, Solana, I've got some different lines here, but in the end, what I wanted to see weeks ago was price get back above and hold above 180. It actually came below that major level on the weekly. It rejected, and it's a lot lower since. As far as Solana goes, I can go to the daily chart. If you're a Solana fan, this 120 area has been a great support over the past year. For price to eventually go below it, then on the daily chart, reject off that area and stay below it, it's not a good thing. I want to see Solana get back above 120, 130, show some strength before I dive into it. Again, I'm not looking to always buy the very bottoms of altcoins. I'm also not looking to sell the very tops. It's rare that I've sold the exact peak top. I sold Bitcoin at around 60,000 instead of 69,000 last cycle. It wasn't the peak top. It was 10, 12% off that. It was a great price to sell, but it wasn't the top. I'm not going to sit here and say I sold the top of every coin or bought the very bottom. The key to trading, the key to investing is buying low, selling high. It doesn't matter if you buy 10% higher if you end up making 2, 3, 4x on something, right? It doesn't matter if you get the exact bottom as long as you're profitable. And I would rather wait to see signs of strength before jumping into a lot of these altcoins. So again, XRP has been one of the strongest ones here. It's holding pretty well at this range at over $2. If it continues to hold there above this 200 daily average here at above 185, it's probably a decent thing. I haven't been a fan of XRP, but you can't deny the strength that it's shown after the has gotten off their backs from lawsuits and a lot of good news with XRP. So bottom line, XRP's been here a long time, just like a lot of these old cryptos. It's probably here to stay. It's got a huge community. Bottom line, is it a good trade? Certainly. When we see strength in the market again, XRP, whatever altcoins like XRP are holding well, those are the tokens and coins you want to hold because they're probably going to recover better overall. Just a look at some of the altcoins, Solana, XRP prices that we've seen, knowing that altcoins in general have nuked pretty badly. But before I jump in front of a moving train of these downward altcoins, I want to see some strength because I'm not looking to buy the very bottom. I'm just looking to make sure that I get in at a price that's not going to lose money over the coming days or weeks, and then that's going to be higher later on. We do know that CPI is the major event for this week. We want to see it be lower. That's going to be good overall. Hopefully for markets, we could see with a lower number, a potential bounce in the markets Wednesday and Thursday going into FOMC next week. From there, we'll have to take it week by week again, because depending on what Powell says, we could see the market pull back again or show continual strength. But bottom line, the way inflation has been going, If truflation and inflation shows how it's potentially been, we could see better prices for risk assets, crypto, stocks, etc., coming into April and May, as well as the Federal Reserve actually cut at those times in May or June. Just good news upon good news here in the next couple of months. As I say, it's always darkest before dawn. So a lot of times when you see these massive nukes and pullbacks, it's really hard to want to buy and get back into the market. But we can foresee better things ahead for Bitcoin in the coming months. With that said, a nice bounce off the 50 weekly EMA right here. If this sustains and can actually have a higher low in good CPI and PPI numbers, we could see a nice bounce for Bitcoin. From there, we'll take it from there. Tomorrow, we will talk about CPI, the numbers, and what that means for you. Also, too, we don't want to forget that $100 in Bitcoin giveaway is right now. Make sure to subscribe if you want to win. The winner this week is Ross, 5,800. Congratulations, Ross, for commenting on the videos this week. You are the winner. I'm going to have you drop your Bitcoin address. I'm going to comment on this, and then I'll make sure to send that to you this week. If you want to win $100 in Bitcoin, make sure to comment on the video and subscribe to the channel. With that said, hey guys, we've got some exciting times ahead. Will Bitcoin stay above $80,000? I think tomorrow is going to be a big deal. Good CPI numbers. I think we have a nice bounce, and then we'll talk about that after that happens. So with that said, you guys trade safe. Maybe a good time to buy Bitcoin. We'll see tomorrow. I'll talk to you guys then. Have a great day.